the air at the end of another tough week for the economy, right? With the markets hitting this Friday in the red, costs going up, all under the whole, are we headed for a recession shadow? We're going to read the market tea leaves and tell you what President Biden's thinking about doing to lower gas prices and how he's trying to balance that with his climate change plans. And in tonight's original, those gas prices aren't just a pain for your average driver. They're now hurting emergency services like fire departments, like EMS. One department predicting $1 million increase in what they pay for gas. We'll talk about what that means for communities all across the country. And the president's also warning people to stay out of Ukraine after we're now learning there could be 3 Americans missing. We've got the update from overseas as Ukraine takes another step closer to joining the EU. Plus, you know who's going live on WWE SmackDown tonight? Vince McMahon, apparently to explain to viewers why he's stepping back from his leadership role after reports he paid out millions in hush money payments. And Disney Pixar fans in at least 14 countries, they don't get to enjoy the new Buzz Lightyear movie because of a ban over a same-sex kiss by one of the main characters. We'll talk about how Disney's positioning itself on LGBTQ+ rights later on in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie, and listen, real talk here. It's been kind of a bummer of a week when it comes to the economy, with the R word, recession, starting to get thrown around a little bit more. Mixed bag tonight on Wall Street. Check out the big board. The Dow down just a little bit. The S&P and NASDAQ both in the green. But if you look at the week as a whole lot of losses. The Dow has actually dropped 1,000 points just since Monday. Now, look, you've seen our show, I hope. You know our mantra. Wall Street is not the economy. But here's the thing. Some of those other indicators, they're not so great either. Just this week, you also had lower retail sales. Mortgage rates were at their highest level in 14 years. And those interest rates saw the biggest single-day bump since Amazon's first day online, good old 1994. Fed Chair Jerome Powell says again today he is committed to getting inflation down. And even though President Biden's insisting a recession is not inevitable, that's not a unanimous opinion when you look at what economic experts say. I want to bring in Tom Costello, who is joining me now. And Tom, I think the question on a lot of people's minds is this recession question, right? The one that President Biden over the last 24 hours has tried to tamp down. This is your beat. You spent like a decade with CNBC covering NASDAQ. Talk to me about what you're hearing from people you're talking to about what we can expect to see next.
Well, listen, this is a debate within the economic circles, within Wall Street. People are going back and forth. Is a recession inevitable? Are we already in a recession? Also, did the Fed do enough? Did it not do enough? As we often say, economists predicted 12 of the last 5 recessions. So this kind of stuff is always happening. There's always a debate. I will say this. At the moment, there's an awful lot to concern everybody. Listen, when you've got 8.6% inflation, as we all know, 40-year high, you slam on the brakes as the Fed is doing. We're going to see interest rates jump dramatically. Keep in mind, we were at historically low interest rates. I mean, you could get a mortgage for hardly anything. That was abnormal. It's not healthy for the economy. The Fed needs to get them back up to a normal level. They're aiming for 2 to 4% somewhere in there. That would be on the inflation number. They're hoping to get interest rates somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5%. Right now, they've peaked. They'll come down eventually. This is not a baked-in conclusion. I will tell you, 60 global CEOs think that, a recession is very likely in the next 12 to 18 months. On the other hand, U.S. Steel just came out and reported record profits. When you've got a steel company, they announce that they're selling steel. What do you use steel for? Building stuff. So they've got record sales. It's hard to, justify and explain both sides of that. But this is very much still a work in progress.
What's the thing that we need to turn this around, right? To turn this picture around, according to experts? Is there like some magic bullet?
Well, listen, I think that most experts would say we have got to absolutely slow the economy. That's the only way you're going to get inflation down. There is some talk out there that maybe oil and gas prices will start to come down because as the economy slows and as demand slows, that may bring oil and gas prices down. That may be a de-inflationary mechanism as well. The part of the problem here is that during the pandemic, the government pumped trillions of dollars into the economy to avoid us from going into a recession or a depression, right? To avoid breadlines and people literally dying in the streets. So now we pay for that. When you had so much money, Republicans did it and Democrats did it, so much money flooding into the economy, now they've got to try to take that money out. The bond market has to readjust. But it's going to be a slow process. This is not an overnight fix. My own opinion is we probably are in for a recession if we're not already in one. But we are in an unusual economy here in the United States in 2022. Things happen like this, right? This is not like the economy of the 80s and 90s. It's entirely possible we'll have a slowdown and maybe we rebound pretty quickly. It's uncharted territory.
Tom Costello, glad to have you with us. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Tonight, speaking of the moves the Biden administration could make, they're reportedly working on a new approach to try and fight those high gas prices. And by the way, simultaneously fight voter frustration, too. You've got prices holding steady at $5 a gallon on average across the country, $2 more than where we were this time last year. And now the Washington Post is reporting the White House is getting back to brainstorming, with senior aides exploring ideas like invoking the Defense Production Act or maybe sending out rebate cards to drivers. There's some irony with that last point, though, because that could run into a separate supply chain issue, which is the chip shortage. Today, you got the president again going after big oil companies, accusing them of jacking up prices and not doing enough to increase production.
They have over 9,000 leases. 9,000. They can drill so the hell won't have it, but they're not doing it.
Maura Barrett is traveling with the president in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. So, Maura, new polling every day shows Americans are frustrated. Americans are getting more and more frustrated. There's these numbers that show nearly half feel very dissatisfied, strongly disapprove, we should say, with the way that President Biden is doing at his job. It feels like some of this reporting around this senior team around the president brainstorming ideas to get gas prices down is an example of the White House recognizing that reality.
Right. Then there's a very stark reality there, Hallie, when it comes to the economy and the president's connection to his popularity. Right. If you want to talk about dissatisfaction in polling, an AP poll showing that just 2 in 10 Americans think that the economy is good right now. And that's down from April, the drop significantly among Democrats. And so that's just not a good sign for the president, in tandem with what you were just talking with Tom about in terms of that whiplash in the stock market and that consumer pricing. There's just not a lot of confidence when voters are going to vote in the midterms in November, and then thinking ahead to what they're looking at for 2024 when they're voting with their wallets. Things just are not in a good place right now, Hallie.
There's this tightrope that the president's walking today, too, because this is all happening on the one hand. On the other hand, he's speaking at a climate forum that included some of the world's top economies. I want to play a little snippet of that.
I'm using every lever available to me to bring down prices for the American people. The critical point is that these actions are part of our transition to a clean and secure and long-term energy future.
So you see there, he's saying how he wants to address the immediate issue of gas prices while still looking long-term to try to show this commitment shared by a lot of his base that he does want to take action on climate change, something that's stalled right now in Congress.
Right, and that's what this forum was supposed to focus on today, was reducing emissions around the world, meeting with 20 of the world's largest economies, hosted with former Secretary of State John Kerry. And that was something that they wanted to highlight around their initiative to reduce methane emission 30% by 2030. But then the president was quick to call out the war in Russia for rising inflation and all of what we've heard so often around those rising gas prices. And so he made a point of talking about that today. And also that this needs to be a team effort when it comes to these economies to reduce global emissions. And so when you look at the immediate short term of what he's trying to do with those gas tax or with the gas rebate cards, the idea of a gas tax holiday, he called out oil companies this week saying, hey, you need to increase gas production and help Americans get these lower gas prices. But he is also trying to focus on what his base is looking at, because the problem is when you're looking to make these big strides with the climate, attacking climate change and solving for it, it takes time. They put it into the infrastructure bill. And I even talked with a company today that's doing renewable energy work around hydropower. Yeah. Even though the work's happening right now, we won't see it until 2027. And so that's the balance the president's struggling with.
Maura Barrett, thanks. The official first day of summer, isn't until Tuesday, but for a lot of the country, summer weather to the extreme is already here. You've got 44 million people under heat alerts today from Denver to Florida. And listen, this is deadly heat. It's killed at least 4 people, even led to the deaths of at least 2,000 cattle in southwest Kansas over the weekend. Millions of people from Savannah to the mid-Atlantic could see storms with 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts and hail, meaning you could see damage like the storms that have ripped through the Midwest this week. Then there's that cleanup around Yellowstone that's still happening after historic flooding there. Today, you've got Montana's governor returning from vacation to see for himself the damage. after some questions about where he was. His office had said he left for a personal trip with his wife prior to the flooding starting. But the rain, the water there, plus the heat and other storms seem to be testing our country's ability to be ready for climate disasters that are happening more often. Bill Cairns is joining us now with more. So let me start here, Bill, with the straight forecast, right? With the heat, what we can expect into the weekend, what we can expect as far as relief.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, deadly, too. We also found out that the third child infant death has occurred from being left in a hot vehicle, a 3-month-old. So, yeah, it's pets, it's elderly, it's young children in the back of cars that fall asleep. Those are the dangers when we get in these heat waves. So the worst of it now, still centered over areas from Little Rock to Memphis. Memphis feels like 108 outside in the shade right now. Not much better in South Carolina, North Carolina. Our friends in Florida are baking everyone from the southeast. 109 in Montgomery is one of the hottest out there. And so, yes, we still have many millions of people under heat advisories. And now we're going to watch the shifting of this heat wave. It's building once again back into the Central Plains. So on Saturday, we see the 90s up into areas like Rapid City, near 100 degrees from Houston all the way up to Dallas. Tallahassee should be 101 with a heat index of 111. Even by Tallahassee standards, that's pretty extreme. And look at the contrast. Look at Caribou, Maine on Sunday, 53 degrees. That's like jacket weather. In the meantime, Fargo's going to be 101, almost a 50-degree difference between northern Maine and areas in the Dakotas. That's ridiculous. And then no relief in sight either. Look at Nashville, Tuesday to Wednesday next week, 101 to 101. Dallas, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, every single day in the triple digits. That does not even take into account the temperatures, and no relief either. Warmer than normal right through the end of June, Hallie.
Give me the climate change factor here, Bill. How does this play into what we've been seeing lately?
Well, we know that the planet has warmed. Compared to like the pre-industrial, the 1800s, we're about 2 degrees warmer right now, almost everywhere in the lower 48. There are some things that we know are worse because of climate change, and we use this graph, and the director going to throw this up full screen. We know that extreme heat and extreme cold are highly impacted by climate change. Now, there's other things that we don't have connections, like tornadoes, severe thunderstorms. We do not have as much confidence in the influence of climate change. But when it comes to droughts, extreme rainfall like we saw in Yellowstone, and extreme heat and extreme cold, we know that those are highly dependent on being impacted by climate change, that they're going to happen more often and they're going to be worse because of what we're doing to our planet.
Bill Cairns. Bill, good to see you. Thank you. I know you're going to have a busy weekend as we watch all that heat. Tonight, we've learned a third person has died after that shooting at an Episcopalian church near Birmingham, Alabama. 84-year-old Walter Rainey was killed. 75-year-old Sarah Yeager died at the hospital. And that third victim, whose name has not been released, was 84 years old. Died at a local hospital. We're also learning new details about the shooter now. Police say the 71-year-old man was an occasional attendee at the church, this suspect, and pulled out a gun during a potluck dinner. He was then held down until police came and is now in custody. It's the latest in a string of shootings that has a core group of bipartisan lawmakers on Capitol Hill scrambling to try to come up with a final deal on new gun legislation before the July 4th recess, right, which is when Congress typically bolts out of town, goes home, and things kind of settle in Washington. But there's this final sticking point. It's the so-called boyfriend loophole that lets dating partners convicted of domestic abuse own guns. I want to bring in now Sam Brock. And Sam, start here with this investigation, this awful shooting in Alabama. Any word on a motive? Do we know anything else about how this investigation is unfolding?
Hallie, I got to tell you, it's pretty bizarre that investigators here will not shed any light on a possible motive. Not only that, they will not even tell you whether or not there was previous encounters between this gunman, this guy, and law enforcement. And so, when you ask the question, they say would imperil their investigation. I also asked whether or not he obtained the firearm that he used legally. Sorry, we're out of questions. Now, it's also notable, this is not your prototypical situation when it comes to shootings. The 18 to 25-year-old that's detached, perhaps had been bullied at some point in their lives and is taking it out at school or didn't get the help they needed. This is a 71-year-old man that brought a concealed handgun into this church behind me. And at some point between 5 and 6:30, the calls came in at 6:22, but according to the church website, this potluck dinner started at 5 o'clock. He could have been there for 10 minutes. He could have been there for an hour and 20 minutes before he ultimately ultimately decided to fire, shot and killed 3 people, 2 84-year-olds, as you said, Hallie, and a 75-year-old as well. So an elderly population that was targeted to begin with, you would think a crime like this might not have been random, that perhaps there was a pre-established relationship there. I will tell you, talking with people around the county here, parishioners, friends and family members who belong to this church, they seem to suggest to me there's something more there, but they weren't willing to reveal what exactly it is. For now, we just know he is an occasional church attendee. Right now, he's in custody and not capable of harming anyone else.
Tell me more about what you're hearing from folks in the community, because I think one of the things that we often hear after just awful shootings like this are people saying, I never thought it could happen here. I never thought it could happen here. And in reality, you know, there is no community that is immune to this kind of thing.
Well, there's no question that people definitely feel that way. I think maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, if you heard about a shooting like this, you'd be shocked and stunned. And there's definitely still some of that. But we've kind of shattered this shield of innocence almost, the sense of violation that safe spaces, schools, churches that are supposed to be protected no longer are safe spaces. But when I really pressed down to some folks here and asked them, you know, what is it about this guy? Was he a frequent visitor here? Did he raise red flags in some way? They kind of clammed up. But it's just so interesting to hear how folks should see a response moving forward. It really splits right along the fault lines in this country. Listen to 2 different reactions to people I talked to. One, a set of college girls that I talked to who were working downtown, and another, an old couple that had been married for 50+ years here. And we'll talk on the back end of this.
It's kind of something you don't really think about what happened in your own, like, college city, and, like, going to school and just kind of even, like, having that a thought in your head.
I don't look at it, gun violence is out of control. I look at it as people are out of control.
Even if people, Hallie, are out of control, there are these red flag laws that are being proposed now, incentivization for states, the 30+ states that don't have them in play. Alabama is not one of them, and a state Democrat here had sponsored it several times. It failed. She says she's going to do it again in a special session or in 2023, hoping for different results. Hallie?
Sam Brock, live for us in Alabama. Sam, we'll look for you again on Nightly with the latest. Really appreciate you being with us. Today, you've got former President Donald Trump, just in the last few hours, going after his former vice president, Mike Pence, just a day after the January 6th committee made its case that Mr. Trump pressured Pence into blocking the certification of the legitimate 2020 election results. Here it is, the first time we have seen Donald Trump in public on camera since those hearings began, speaking in front of the Faith and Freedom Coalition in Nashville. Mr. Trump called Pence a human conveyor belt because he, in the former president's word, had to send the votes and couldn't do anything.
Mike Pence had a chance to be great. He had a chance to be, frankly, historic. But just like Bill Barr and the rest of these weak people, Mike, and I say it sadly because I like him, but Mike did not have the courage to act.
Much of that, of course, echoes what we have heard from the former president in the past. And it comes as the January 6th committee says it's now cooperating with the Department of Justice and sharing transcripts of their interviews with witnesses. Joining me now is Hallie Raffa. Hallie, listen, the Department of Justice had to ask the committee twice to share the transcripts, right? Why now are they saying yes and moving forward with this? As, by the way, the Justice Department wants those transcripts from the many witnesses the Select Committee talked with because the DOJ thinks it could help their own investigations and prosecutions.
Yeah, Hallie, this is a really interesting development here because remember, the committee members have said publicly that they're frustrated with members of the DOJ and how slowly they've been willing to act on criminal contempt referrals that the committee has sent. And now you have the DOJ expressing some frustration with the committee after they say that they need these transcripts, this tranche of transcripts from, we now know, over 1,000 witnesses that the committee has interviewed, saying it is, quote, critical to their investigations of people who were involved on January 6th on the Capitol, the attack on the Capitol. And so the committee is now saying that it is working with the Department of Justice. We expect these transcripts to be shared when these hearings are over by the end of the month. A committee spokesperson saying to us in a statement, quote, the Select Committee is engaged in a cooperative process to address the needs of the Department of Justice. We are not inclined to share the details of that publicly. We believe accountability is important and won't be an obstacle to the Department Department's prosecutions. A couple reasons for this initial hesitancy, Hallie, as you mentioned, this was the second request that the Justice Department sent to the committee, is just because of the magnitude of this request. We know that one of the hearings that was scheduled for this week was postponed because of what committee members said was an overwhelmed staff and having to cut all of the clips of those pre-recorded testimonies. So we can only imagine how big of a task it would be to share over 1,000 witness testimony documents with the Justice Department. Another reason for this hesitancy could be because the committee is still meeting with witnesses. They have said in these hearings that they hope that their real portrayal of what they're expressing in these hearings will inspire more people to come forward and speak with committee members. So really just a back and forth here. Now we know that the committee is working with the Justice Department, but still a lot of details still unknown, Hallie.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I just want to say to that point, you know, the exact point you're making about the idea that more witnesses may be coming forward. It's exactly what I asked a member of the Select Committee, Jamie Raskin, Congressman Raskin, about. He is heading the hearing that we're going to see, like, in a couple hearings down the line, specifically on the mobilization of this mob at the Capitol. But I want you to listen to a little bit of that back and forth. We're looking ahead to the next hearings. Are all your witnesses first lined up for the remaining hearings at this point, or is that still getting worked out?
Well, no, it's still a moving target, and we continue to get new disclosure of information and new witnesses getting in touch with us on an almost daily basis.
Which I think, Hallie, speaks to this idea that this is very much an ongoing investigation, not a wrapped-up investigation.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we have a member of our team staked out outside the hearing room that the committee usually meets in, not very far from here. And she was sending some notes saying that, we can't confirm whether the committee is meeting with the witness today, but the committee is still actively at work before these hearings, still gathering new evidence, new testimonies. She said that members have brought in notepads, water bottles. They turned a noise machine on, which is usually, if history holds here, what we've seen when the committee meets with witnesses and records some testimonies. And so Raskin, again, is stressing that the committee is still at work, still collecting evidence, and that could be a reason for this hesitancy with the Department of Justice, Hallie.
Allie Rafa, live on the Hill. Allie, thanks. NBC News Now, by the way, is going to have coverage of the next hearing, of course, right here Tuesday, 12:30 Eastern, however you're watching now on NBC News Now. President Biden tonight warning Americans about traveling to Ukraine after we learned that 3 Americans may now be missing there. Watch.
I have been briefed. We don't know where they are, but I want to reiterate, Americans should not be going to Ukraine now. Say it again. Americans should not be going to Ukraine now.
We still don't know the details of the third case, but it comes after the families of these 2 men you see on your screen, Alex Drueke and Andy Wynn, say they worry that those 2 have been captured by Russian forces in Russia. You had President Putin also out today. You see him there. He was talking in St. Petersburg at a business conference where he really went after the U.S., calling it a declining power that treats its allies like colonies. Ali Arouzi is with us now. And Ali, President Biden gave a pretty clear warning to Americans today. Tell us what more we know about Drueke and Wynn's situation, what Russia is saying and all this, too.
Well, we don't know a lot about them right now. We know that they were taken in some fierce fighting on the 9th of June, according to their colleagues that were fighting there with them. And then they've basically gone missing. The State Department hasn't been able to confirm any of this right now. And they're saying for privacy reasons, they're not going into this. There have been some reports in Russian media, again, that's for privacy reasons. We can't go into this, but there is obviously serious concern, if true, if these guys have been taken, because we know the prisoners of war have been treated very badly here. We've seen those 2 British ex-soldiers that were taken by the Russians. They were holed up in a kangaroo court. They were given the death sentence. So now the fear is once we get some official word from the Russians, and if they do have them, they may be brought up in some sort of a court and bogus charges brought against them as acting as mercenaries here in Russia. So it's a very concerning situation. We are following it closely, and any more details we get that we're allowed to give, we'll bring to you, Hallie.
I appreciate that, Ali. I know you will. President Putin, we showed him in the introduction there. And right before he gave this big speech, just slamming the West, right, there was a cyber attack that delayed the speech that hit the computers there. How should we be reading what we're hearing from Putin now? What's your sense?
That's right. There was this massive DDoS attack delaying the speech by an hour, which was quite embarrassing for him at this, economic forum he's holding in St. Petersburg. And, Hallie, like you reported last week, he has these imperialistic tendencies, sort of modestly comparing himself to Peter the Great. And now this forum, he was sort of heralding in a new world order. He's talking about, Russia having this amazing opportunity at this time to go from strength to strength. He said it's emerging as this very powerful sovereign nation. So he's talking about Russia's expansion at a time when he's invaded another country. He's under heavy economic sanctions, and Russia has essentially become a global pariah right now. So it's quite a speech to give at a time when Russia is in bad stead in the world and at home with their economy. But even last week, he was talking about opening up a new G8, moving away from the Western G8 because it's a failing economy in the West, and Russia is emerging, and China and Iran and other places like this should join forces to counter the West.
Ali Arouzi, you are doing yeoman's work there in Kyiv for us. Thank you for your analysis, your perspective, your reporting. It's really important. Appreciate it. Coming up, a source of distraction and embarrassment. That's what some SpaceX employees are saying about Elon Musk. And guess what? Now they don't have a job. We're going to talk about what's going on at the company. Plus, the FBI is warning of a significant threat on LinkedIn that can cost users a ton of money. That's coming up in the 5 Things. Speaking up has cost at least 5 SpaceX employees their jobs, according to our colleagues at CNBC. In his email obtained by the New York Times, the company's president said employees who signed an open letter released earlier this week were intimidated, he says, and bullied into it, adding, "We have too much critical work to accomplish and no need for this kind of overreaching activism." NBC News reached out to the company for a response to the firings, but have not heard back. That letter, first reported by The Verge, demanded that SpaceX executives denounce Elon Musk's behavior, saying it's a distraction and an embarrassment for them, and that every tweet Musk sends reflects on SpaceX. All of it's happening the same day that the company is successfully launching the first of 3 rockets this weekend, setting a new record and marking its 100th successful mission. But it also comes after a fairly rocky meeting with Twitter employees and Musk, where those employees shared their concerns ahead of him taking over Twitter. And by the way, as if that weren't enough headlines on Elon Musk, you have this nearly $260 billion crypto lawsuit filed against him for what an investor calls a pyramid scheme, and a report from the Highway Safety Administration that showed Teslas using driver assist systems that were involved in 273 crashes out of the nearly 400 reported in the past year. Jake Ward joins me now. What a bonkers week of headlines for Elon Musk, Jake, right? Let me take just the first one here. I know. Yeah. Let me just take the first one that we talked about, this new one today, which is SpaceX basically downplaying this letter where some employees called Musk's behavior embarrassing and distracting. Now those employees do not have a job. Is that not retaliation? Or how are we to understand this?
Well, certainly the National Labor Relations Board protects in the United States the right of employees to have a concerted, is the word, communication, and especially when it has to do with conditions of their employment, the labor conditions that they face. And in this particular case, Hallie, they are specifically writing to complain that Elon Musk's open tweeting is basically hurting their reputation in the workplace, making it hard for them to hire talent. All of this, they say, having a bad effect on the company. But then you have this leaked letter reported by the New York Times in which Gwynne Shotwell, the president of SpaceX, essentially says, as you say, this is overreach activism. So if a lawyer wanted to get involved and try to connect the firing of these people to the writing of this letter, it wouldn't be hard to prove. And so, yeah, I was really slapping my face in the face getting ready for this, Hallie, because there's just so much going on in Elon Musk's world. It is totally overwhelming. And this is really an extraordinary new headache he's got to be staying up thinking about.
Yes, Jake, I love that you prep for our discussions on this show, but please do not slap yourself in the face. That sounds dangerous. When you talk about, there is a bit of irony here, right?
Very necessary, but yes.
In that you've got this Twitter takeover that Elon Musk wants. You've got this town hall that reportedly got somewhat heated. Some employees had some pretty negative reactions, according to CNBC, to this Q&A session. Those Slack messages were leaked. or leaked rather. Musk just wrote interesting about it. But there is some sort of irony here that on one hand, one of his companies taking action against employees who spoke up. On the other hand, Musk hoping to push this free speech idea on Twitter if he buys it out. I don't know. It just feels like a little disconnect.
How do you put all this together? Yeah. No, you're not nuts, and that is exactly correct. I mean, what we're talking about here is a checklist of items among which the cognitive dissonance is so overpowering. You know, I mean, I don't have this, reported out, but I can assume that Elon Musk is not writing down all of the various positions he has taken publicly in these various places. So, right, his president of SpaceX is firing these people for speaking out at the same time that he's telling the Twitter employees in their all-hands meeting, according to the leaked accounts from within it, that, people should be able to say whatever they want to say as long as it doesn't break the law. He's also talking about giving people the opportunity to buy verified status, the blue checkmark that makes them a sort of VIP on Twitter, even though up until now it's only been really given to journalists and academics and other people who can be shown to, speak truth and have influence and so forth. You also have him talking about possibly having something like an irony button on Twitter. And at the same time, you have this lawsuit, $260 billion that you're talking about, that's based almost entirely on him making jokes about Dogecoin and pushing that cryptocurrency. That seems to have gotten him into trouble. I mean, it is really amazing. If you write it all out, none of it really connects in terms of what values are going forward here. But we certainly are seeing somebody who has shown tremendous intolerance toward dissent when it comes to SpaceX and Tesla. Now he seemingly wants to buy the platform of dissent in American, certainly political speech. It's not clear to me what the plan is here, Hallie.
Jake Ward, we will puzzle over it over the weekend. I'm sure there will be more headlines for us to discuss on Monday. Thank you. Let's get you over now to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the UK has approved Julian Assange's extradition to the United States. Assange, of course, is the founder of WikiLeaks, wanted in the U.S. to face trial on 18 charges, including breaking espionage laws. Assange has denied wrongdoing. His lawyer has said he would appeal the decision. Number 2. CNBC reports the FBI says fraud on LinkedIn is a significant threat. Here's the deal. They say these fraudsters apparently pose as like regular professionals. They start a little bit of small talk. They offer to help you make a little money through crypto. The person might start off investing on like a legitimate crypto platform, but then the fraudster convinces them to move money to a different site they control. LinkedIn reportedly acknowledged a recent increase in fraud and says it removed 32 million fake accounts last year. So something to watch out for if you are a big LinkedIn fan. Number 3, today the FDA authorized Moderna and Pfizer's COVID vaccines for the country's littlest kids, 6 months to 5 years. One step closer, right? Final step happens tomorrow. Final 2 steps. The CDC's got to sign off. We think that's going to happen midday tomorrow. At some point then, presumably quite soon after, the CDC director has to sign off. And then that is it. That is the final green light. Shots are expected to go into arms as early as next week. Number 4, did you catch the latest surprise album dropping at midnight by Drake? It's called Honestly, Nevermind, his 7th studio album. In a note attached to it on Apple Music, he said it was dedicated to Virgil Abloh, the influential fashion designer who died last year after a battle with cancer. Number 5, the Warriors are golden indeed. The Golden State Warriors beating Boston last night for their 4th NBA title since 2015. There's Steph Curry, MVP, spraying a little champs, got his goggles on, got to protect the eyes. I'm sure there'll be more champagne spraying during the championship parade Monday in San Francisco. WWE Chairman and CEO Vince McMahon, he's set to go on TV tonight in just a couple of hours in character to talk about the controversy around the company's investigation into possible misconduct by him, according to CNBC. The WWE announced today McMahon is stepping back from his duties on the board as the company investigates him and the head of talent relations, John Laurinaitis. In a statement released by the WWE, McMahon says he'll cooperate with the investigation and has, quote, pledged to accept the findings and outcome, whatever they are. Here's the deal. Why is all this happening? The Wall Street Journal reported that the WWE board was looking at a $3 million hush money payment from McMahon to somebody who used to work for him to apparently keep her quiet about an alleged affair between the two. The report also says this broader investigation dug up some previous non-disclosure agreements with former female employees who alleged misconduct by both McMahon and Laurinaitis. Vaughn Hilliard joins me now with the story. And Vaughn, let's start with this controversy, right? If the reporting is correct, and there is still a need for investigation, of course, but how is it that McMahon is able to go on TV tonight and then in character respond to this, like what's being reported? Like, how does this work?
I mean, I think we need to take into context, right, who Vince McMahon is, Hallie. He's sort of a Donald Trump-like figure to the WWE. He has been the face of the WWE for the last 4 decades here. He puts on a show. You know, WWE was sort of reality television before reality television became synonymous with American television here. This is a man who I think it would not be surprising for him to respond in any other way. Now, I think it's important to note that the lawyer for McMahon told the Wall Street Journal that this was a consensual relationship and that this individual who was apparently a paralegal at WWE when she was hired on in 2019, this arrangement, this payment of $3 million to our understanding was in this January here. But again, this idea that this was a consensual relationship at the same time, one in which she left the company in which she was not paid out. And so that's where some of these questions and potential misconduct. We're talking about a 76-year-old man here who is not only the majority shareholder of this company, but also the chairman and CEO of it.
By the way, his family members, right? I think his daughter, heavily involved. They're on the board.
And the son.
Yep. You know, it's a huge brand. It's a huge brand. It has a lot of media partnerships. We should note one of those partnerships is with our parent company, NBC Universal. They're partners with a lot of organizations from the Special Olympics to GLAAD. The list goes on. Are we hearing from any of those partners about what's been going on, this reported investigation?
Yeah, our parent company has not provided a statement here at this time, but there is an independent investigation that the WWE has commissioned to look into this, and that is where Vince McMahon has said that he will pay his respects essentially to whatever findings come of this. In the meanwhile, his daughter, who you mentioned, Stephanie McMahon, has stepped in an interim capacity. You know, Linda McMahon, Vince McMahon's longtime wife, she served as the Small Business Administration head in the Trump administration. She used to be co-CEO and chair with Vince McMahon, but when she took that role with the Trump administration, she left that position, and that is where you see Stephanie step into this role here. But at the same time, while he's stepping back from chairman and CEO, WWE says that he is still going to be overseeing creative content, which is why it would be no surprise that he is placing himself in his character role here tonight. Again, the last year, this is a company that brought in $1 billion. Vince McMahon and the McMahon family is at the heart of this.
Vaughn Hilliard, SmackDown, going to have a lot of viewers tonight, I would think. It always does. Appreciate it, Vaughn. Thank you.
Thanks.
When we come back, we've been talking about high gas prices hurting people's wallets. Well, you know what? They're also a challenge for first responders, what that means for some smaller communities in this country. And then in the local, Phil Mickelson's bad day at the U.S. Open. Although it may have been even worse for a fan. Ugh. Stay with us. To tonight's Original Now, with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. And today, it's consequences of inflation, right? We've been talking about it for a while now. You could probably name 6 reasons why you don't love inflation, whether it's what you pay at the grocery store, what you pay at the gas station. For a lot of folks, more expensive costs mean getting serious about your budget, cutting back, less spending, maybe fewer times going out to eat or going to the movies or whatever. But what happens when important emergency services that are already spread thin from a couple years of the pandemic can't even afford to fill up their tanks? It's becoming a bigger problem in some parts of the country, forcing some fire departments and EMS services to limit the kinds of calls they can respond to. Our own Isa Gutierrez takes a closer look.
The high cost of fuel isn't just making your commute more expensive. It's also forcing emergency responders in smaller communities to cut costs.
We've never seen costs like this since I've been sheriff.
We're at 100% usage of our allotted fuel budget for this budget year already. I'm worried about the state of emergency response agencies throughout the nation.
I spoke with departments across the country who told me they're already having to or will have to make big sacrifices to offset the cost of gas.
One of the things we're doing today is we call it No Drive Friday. So the crews aren't really allowed to leave the station unless it's an emergency. We're also trying to reduce the number of vehicles that we send on an emergency response.
Decrease spending, purchasing new equipment, or possibly some of our maintenance items for the year. Those pre-disaster or pre-emergency activities that are labeled as non-emergency.
For some, it means not responding to non-emergency calls. For others, cutting back on patrols, building inspections, and training courses for staff. Today, the average cost of a gallon of regular gas in the U.S. at a whopping $5. That price tag expected to climb further in the summer months.
We're predicting a minimum of an $800,000 to $1 million countywide fleet vehicle increase in the fuel costs. And that cost is going to be astronomical.
The surge impacting larger emergency response departments too, but not in the same way.
They have money, larger budgets, money that can be reallocated, moved around from, let's say, a surplus or a rainy day fund.
There are many local small emergency response agencies like ours. It's very, very detrimental to us being able to manage these budgets and also progress agencies forward to ensure that we're prepared for emergencies when they happen.
Despite their concerns of what the coming months may look like, these officials all wanted to make one thing clear.
When emergencies happen and people dial 911, they're going to get service. No matter what, when the call comes in, we're going to respond to the absolute best of our abilities. However, community members need to be aware of the problem. We're fighting it just the same as you are in your home.
Issa is joining us now. And Issa, that last maybe 15 seconds, I think is so important there, right? Saying, if you call 911, you will get help. Like, this is not going to affect, because I don't think what we don't want to do is freak people out. They're making the point, these officials you're talking to, yes, this is an issue. It is not going to affect your level of service, but it is something to be mindful of, sort of on a broader, less urgent way, I think is fair to say.
That's exactly right, Hallie. They're going to make cuts elsewhere to ensure that their response time is not cut down, especially for those emergencies, right? That being said, this will have impacts, they say, for regular people in other ways. You know, you heard about cutting back on those pre-emergency activities, building inspections, for example. That's something you don't really think about very often until it's too late, right? And some of them are having to cut back on those. Another really interesting thing that the chief from Colorado pointed out to me are ambulance costs. So I didn't know this myself, but these departments are paid a flat fee to operate these ambulances, and they don't account for fuel surcharges. And insurance, Medicaid, Medicare, they don't cover that either. So that's coming out of the patient's pockets right now, something you don't think about, but just unbelievable how these costs trickle down to the patient, even in these traumatic and already very expensive experiences. Hallie?
Issa Gutierrez, great reporting. Thank you for being with us. Coming up, it's a holiday weekend. It is a holiday weekend. That's right. But there's one thing about Juneteenth people are not celebrating. What the backlash is all about when we come back. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, John Hinckley Jr.'s concert in Brooklyn next month has been canceled over safety concerns. Remember, Hinckley shot President Reagan in 1981 and has turned to music since being released from a mental health facility. He was recently freed from court oversight. It was the venue's decision to cancel this, by the way. Hinckley tweeted his promoter is looking for a new venue. Also from our Northeast Bureau, Phil Mickelson's weekend at the U.S. Open is over. He missed the cut to advance. And he also, this is a scary picture. He also apparently hit a fan with a golf ball on the third hole. You saw that person right there. Mickelson came by, shook his hand after. Apparently, that person was okay, fortunately. Mickelson was allowed to play in the Open, but remember, he's been banned from tournaments on the PGA Tour because he joined that new Saudi-backed league, Live Golf. From our Southeast Bureau, a paddleboarder rescued a pilot Thursday after the little plane the pilot was in crashed into a lake in Austin, Texas. The Texas Parks and Wildlife Agency says the plane had just had some maintenance done and the pilot reported having issues. He got out on his own, and then luckily that paddleboarder was there to bring him to shore. Look at that. The pilot went to a hospital to get checked out. Juneteenth is coming up this weekend, and a year after it has become an official federal holiday, some companies are now selling Juneteenth branded products. Look at this example on your screen. A tweet from May from this year, Dollar Tree, selling their Juneteenth paper plates and party supplies. But because this holiday commemorates the emancipation of slaves in the U.S., you got some folks that are really not happy with what they see as commercialization of it, getting online to share their concerns. Shaq Brewster has the story.
After George Floyd's death in 2020 and in the wake of nationwide protests that followed, Last year, President Biden signed a bill that officially recognized Juneteenth as a federal holiday, a date that's been celebrated for centuries. After President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, word of their new freedom finally reached the last group of enslaved African Americans in Texas on June 19, 1865.
Juneteenth is about commemorating emancipation, which means commemorating the history of slavery.
Like many other national holidays, from Memorial Day to President's Day, some companies have begun commercializing it. Walmart recently apologized for selling a special edition Juneteenth ice cream with a label that read, "Share and celebrate African American culture, emancipation, and enduring hope." The new product received backlash on social media, and the retail giant issued a public apology and removed the ice cream from their shelves.
I think if more companies had more people in decision-making positions who could help inform those conversations, they would think of more nuanced and I would just say better ways of recognizing the holiday.
When the Children's Museum of Indianapolis started offering a Juneteenth watermelon salad, people took to Facebook to call out the museum for the insensitive stereotype.
If you must profit as a company, to do so in a way that is not offensive, that does not perpetuate stereotypes, and that really is thoughtful.
Back in 2020, Snapchat released a special Juneteenth filter, prompting users to smile to, quote, break the digital chains. A few hours later, they pulled it and apologized for the insensitivity. We reached out to these companies for comment. The Children's Museum of Indianapolis responded, sharing a statement saying, in part, "We are an imperfect institution, but we are committed to improvement." Walmart did not immediately respond to our request for comment, and Snapchat responded, pointing us to an earlier statement they released regarding this incident, saying in part, "We deeply apologize to the members of the Snapchat community who found this lens offensive." Why are companies upsetting so many people with these products?
I think that companies should be in consultation with members of the Black community before making these decisions so that they are making good business decisions that are informed by the communities that they are seeking to serve.
Shaq is joining us now. And I'm so glad you did this story for us, Shaq, tonight, because I think it's interesting, especially in light of the weekend that's upon us here. It feels like, and the piece was, the point was made in your piece here, it's commercialization and it's companies, perhaps it seems, not understanding the nuance here, right? And not having a full understanding of what this is about.
Yeah, the concern that you hear, Hallie, is that they're taking it too lightly, that they're simply acknowledging Juneteenth as a way to simply make some more money. And, you know, it's not every company, I should mention. You know, there's a tweet that I saw from Ben & Jerry's from 2019 honoring Juneteenth, saying it's the true Independence Day. Ben & Jerry's is a company that is also put its money where its mouth is. They funded a lot of social justice movement initiatives across the country. That was a tweet that happened before this was an official holiday. That was before the death, the murder of George Floyd. So this is not an accusation against every company. It's just simply folks saying, if you're going to acknowledge Juneteenth, take it seriously. And by the way, Hallie, this is a similar sentiment that you hear from members of the military community around Memorial Day. You hear it from members of the LGBTQ community during this Pride Month. It's a familiar sentiment.
I thought immediately of Memorial Day, right, Shaq? Because that is something, too, that is somewhat analogous here. Shaq Brewster live for us on that. Shaq, really glad you're with us tonight. Thanks. Coming up, that new Pixar movie, Lightyear, may be a part of your weekend plans, but not if you live in more than a dozen countries that have banned the movie. We'll talk about what's behind the controversy this Pride Month and what that means for its box office numbers next. The new prequel to the Toy Story movies called Lightyear is out today, but more than a dozen countries have banned it. Why? Because the movie features an animated same-sex couple. We're talking about Buzz's friend, Alicia, a female space ranger who's married to a woman, and in a montage of their life together, the two share a kiss. Countries including Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Lebanon, they're not showing the film. It's also expected China will not either. And while at least 14 countries have banned it outright, they're actually probably not going to hurt the movie's bottom line. Toy Story 4 made more than $1 billion around the world, with the U.S. and Canada bringing in the most ticket sales. If you look at Saudi, Egypt, others combined, they only made up less than 2% of the profits. George Solis is here to get into it. George, you know, the numbers show that this like, it's an interesting cultural controversy here in that for the U.S. audience, it seems to be an absolute non-factor, right? The international audience, it's a different story when it comes to some of these nations. But from a bottom line perspective, it's probably not going to make a difference. You've got some critics saying it's just the latest example of anti-LGBTQ plus sentiment.
Right. Good to be here with you, Hallie. And just to put some context into this, where this movie was banned in much of these Muslim countries, well, same-sex relationships are illegal. And you're right. They don't think this is going to have a huge impact on the bottom line for the film. It's not to say Disney hasn't been including some same-sex relationships in some of their other properties, things like Star Wars and Marvels. And we should note the film star, Chris Evans, he's also weighed in on some of this controversy, expressing a little bit of frustration with all of this surrounding his film, telling Variety, and I quote, "It's wonderful. It makes me happy. It's tough not to be a little frustrated that this even has to be a topic of discussion." He goes on to say, the goal is that we can get to a point where this is the norm.
That's interesting, right? Because you look at the broader context of this, too, as it relates to Disney. And there were reports that Disney cut out the kiss at one point, and then employees pushed back. Disney brought it back. This was right around the same time that the company was taking heat from employees for not responding to Florida's so-called Don't Say Gay bill when that was first announced. It seems to speak to this moment for the company positioning itself when it comes to LGBTQ plus rights.
That's right, Hallie. And we did reach out to Disney today for comment about this latest controversy. We did not hear back. And you were absolutely right. Disney did take its lumps for staying quiet on the Don't Say Gay bill controversy. They since have said that they do oppose it and have taken a stance saying they will oppose any other legislation that targets the LGBTQ plus community.
So does that mean we'll see more representation and more Disney movies and Pixar movies going forward, do you think? What are your analysts telling you?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that is the million-dollar question to all of this. Now, Pixar, we know, has been including some same-sex storylines for a couple of years now. Lightyear obviously being the latest example. But a lot of advocates are hoping that this continues to be a push and really moves this conversation beyond just the controversy into a more positive place. Hallie.
George Solis, I'm so glad you're with us. Thank you for being out there. Posted up on the West Coast for our entertainment news tonight. Thank you very much. That does it for us this hour. Happy Friday. You made it. You're there. It begins. Go pour a glass or whatever you like. See you here Monday. Same time, same place. Coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.